Ronald Hae, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm super excited to have you here and have everyone who's listening to this hear your story and hear about the amazing work that you're doing in your classroom, Ronald. But before we get into that, before we get into all the fun stuff, we're going to start this conversation with the most important question that you're going to get today. It's quite frankly going to help set a tone for the rest of the interview, and it's what our listeners, they want an answer to. So, Ronald, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
100%. Like 100%. There's no doubt. I don't even know why you asked that question, because you got to be crazy to not like pineapple on pizza. It is the most delicious topping on a pizza.
When I started this podcast, Ronald, I believed everything that you just said, that you would have to be crazy to not love it. And I've now had to reassess my opinion. I still love pineapple on pizza, but it's only a slight majority of pro pineapple. So it's a very divisive topic, which is why we have to start with this question. But luckily, you've answered it the correct way. So you've now won over a plethora of new fans, which we'll come back to later because you have a podcast of your own. So I want to let them know about that. But before we get into that, Ronald, so do me a favor, introduce yourself. Who is Ronald and what are you doing for work right now?
Yeah. So my name is Ronald Hae. I'm a high school teacher in Oakville, Ontario. I teach primarily business, but for the last couple of years, I've been teaching grade 11 and 12 accounting. And, outside of teaching, I'm a comedian as well. And I also host my own podcast called The Teacher Hotline.
Let's talk about that real quick because it's brand new. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
One podcast host to another, right? What is Teacher Hotline and why did you start it?
Yeah, the Teacher Hotline is a show for teachers. And the whole premise of the show is that a teacher is going to call in like one of those like old school like radio shows,
Yeah.
and they have a question, and I try to find someone to have an answer for that question, because there's a lot of questions out there, like, how does my pension work? What's it like to work at a private school? And a lot of these questions don't get really talked about, and this is kind of a platform to have those questions answered.
That's super cool. And obviously I'm a fan of podcasting. One of the reasons I am such a fan of it is it's been such an honest and authentic conversation. For whatever reason, people just seem to let their guards down. It's just two people having a conversation. So I feel like a lot of teachers answering those questions would do so in a much more authentic way than if they had to post their answer publicly online in a forum or something like that. So it's gonna be pretty interesting. What's one of the questions that you guys have had so far or are excited to answer in the future?
Yeah, so our first 2 episodes just got launched, and our first episode that had a lot of success was around what is it that students want in a amazing teacher. And I think there's a lot of differences between what a teacher thinks makes a great teacher versus what a student wants. So we talk about and break down from a student's perspective, what do they want in a classroom teacher? And a lot of it comes down to care. A lot of it comes down to just them being there for the students. And a lot of it sounds common sense, but when you hear it, you're like, yeah, you know what? I don't know if I'm actually doing that. So really, really interesting stuff. So go check it out.
Yeah, no kidding. Teacher Hotline. Okay. So Ronald, now we're fans of yours. You got a cool podcast. You love pineapple on pizza. Let's drill into the meat of this conversation. So season 1 of this podcast was all about interviewing industry professionals. So what are the 21st century skills? What are these core competencies that you need to be successful in the workplace? And what do they actually look like on display? Because as we know, it's really easy to tell a student, you're going to need to have problem solving skills. You're going to need to be a critical thinker, but it's a lot better for the students to actually have an example of what that looks like on display in the workplace. We've done a pretty good job of that through season 1, where we're now bringing it back to the classroom. Season 2 is talking to educators like yourself to learn about some of the amazing ways that teachers are empowering their students to develop these 21st century skills. I'm in a very privileged position that I get to work with educators across North America. So I hear these stories all the time. I just think we need to do a better job of amplifying the voice of the educator and sharing these stories. So Ronald, imagine I'm a teacher, I'm listening to this short episode on the drive into work, and I want to take your idea, borrow and steal it, bring it back to my classroom about something that you've done to empower your students to develop one of these core competencies. What does that look like for you?
That's a great question, Damien. One of the things I've been focusing on over the last couple of years is financial literacy. And I think financial literacy is just grossly underdeveloped in our school systems. And in the Canadian education system, the government recently launched a financial literacy initiative and started trying to implement this in our grade 10 career studies course. which I think is a great start. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if it's where we need to be yet in terms of teaching this skill to our students.
Yep.
So I'm taking it upon myself to teach this skill to my grade 11 and 12 students. And one of the things I'm doing right now is I have this assignment called our financial literacy assignment. Kind of a boring name, but it gets to the point.
Yep.
And the assignment essentially is I get my grade 12 students, they pick a topic in the world of financial literacy, anything to do with TFSAs, RRSPs, credit cards, you name it. They become the expert. They come back to class sometime during the school year and they present that topic in any way that they want. It could be a video, could be a PowerPoint, could be a whatever. They're going to present that material, they become the expert, and then after that we kind of have a Q&A session and we talk about it. So we carve that time purposely out of our accounting classroom. It's not in the curriculum, but I think it's important that we talk about it and we make time for it. And surprisingly, the students love this project. They get really into it and they're craving for this knowledge as well. So It's not even about the grades at this point. This is more about just wanting to know how to get prepared for life after high school.
I love that you're doing that, Ronald. Yeah, and I agree with so many things you just said that, we've introduced some new curriculum for grade 10, but it is a start. It's a forward momentum, but it's not nearly enough, right? So it's so cool you're doing that, and it makes sense that your students are into it, especially if you're working with the grade 11s. Like, these are things that they're really gonna have to think about pretty soon, right?
A lot of them are, they're getting their jobs for the first time and they're getting paychecks and they don't know what CPP is or how even taxes work. And so it's a great time to introduce the topic because they're naturally interested. So if they're interested, let's get them on board, right?
100%. And, I've probably made some enemies with math teachers because I've said this a few times, so I'm sorry again, math teachers, but I always reflect back on how much time I spent learning the Pythagorean theorem versus how much time I spent learning what a TFSA and RRSP is, and which one of those am I really going to have to use every year. For some occupations, you will need that Pythagorean, sure, but large majority, or at least everybody else, you will need to learn about what a TFSA is and RRSP is and your CPP. So those are life skills that I think should be part of the curriculum, but thank you for making that a priority in your class. And there's so many competencies that are coming out of that for your students, right? From communication with the presentation skills, all of the research they're gonna have to do when they're figuring these things out, problem solving, a lot of critical thinking. There's so many cool competencies that come out of a project, and then giving them the student voice and choice to kind of present it in the format that they want to is kind of like the cherry on top. So that's a really cool example that I hope many teachers, regardless of where you're listening to this, will embed. And it is probably the most common answer that we heard from season 1 about a life skill that we wish we were taught in high school but weren't, was financial literacy. So thank you for hoping that the answer changes in the years to come.
Crossing our fingers here.
Ronald, you've done such a good job embedding financial literacy into your classroom that you've now been promoted to superintendent of a school district. So congratulations for that.
Oh, wow. This is great. Do I get a pay raise with this as well?
Unfortunately not, no. And it only lasts 10 minutes. It's really just for this, but it does come with some responsibility. You have to decide one of these 21st century skills. So one of these core competencies that every one of your graduating students needs to display evidence of in order to graduate. If you could only pick one, which one would you pick?
There's so many of them, right? I think just even staying on topic of what we were just talking about a second ago, if I were to pick one, and I think maybe I'm just biased because I am a business teacher and I teach accounting right now, but I feel like financial literacy is such a core competency that needs to be embedded in the curriculum right now. Yep. And I feel like that every student needs to come out of high school displaying that they understand some component of financial literacy of their future. And I don't think grade 10 careers as one unit is good enough to display that, right? And I talked to my assistant head of academics at our school during one of our parent-teacher interviews, and I actually just floated the idea by him. I'm like, hey, like, what do you think about, having a course designed strictly just for this topic? And he loved the idea. And I think what it really comes down to in a perfect world is there's just a lot of logistical issues, right? Because number one, you got to find the teachers that are capable of talking about this topic intelligently enough with our students. Right. And we need to, number two, where do we fit this in now our curriculum, right? There's so many mandatory courses that students have to take, prerequisites to get into med school and into the science programs. So the student schedule is already so packed. where do we now fit this in, especially in those upper years? And I think that becomes the challenge. Something needs to give, but in a perfect world, I would love to do that as this superintendent for the next 10 minutes.
Yes, I think it's so important that I'll allow you to repeat it, right? I agree with you for everything you just said, right? Like, especially for our grade 12s. Look, Mr. Hae, I need a 90 to get into this program. I don't have time to take this optional life skills course, right? So it's a bigger conversation, but I'm glad you found a way to embed it into your classroom. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's do some rapid fires for you, Ronald. And actually, so this is one where I'm not going to allow you to say financial literacy again, even though it may be your answer, just so we can mix it up. But what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, maybe that you wish that you were?
Definitely cooking. Cooking, yeah. I'm pretty sure we actually may have had that class in my high school. I know not every high school has that because they don't have like the kitchens and all that stuff. Yeah. But when you go off to university, college, or heck, even if you don't want to go into post-secondary education, you're going to have to live on your own at some point. And honestly, like embarrassingly enough, I was making too many pizza pockets and Jamaican patties in my undergrad days. So cooking would have been really nice to learn in high school.
I can agree with you on that one. I had far too many chicken fingers and fries dinners for a long time. And I think our high school even had it. I'm sure it wasn't called home ec, but a class like that. And just for whatever reason, I didn't think it was interesting. Now I'm really regretting not taking that class. Yeah,
absolutely.
My partner as well. Yeah. Ronald, you have a billboard. Let's say it's in front of your school and every student's going to see it on the way into the school. You can write one thing on it. What would it say?
It would say, go get your vaccine right now. Peel, Halton, all these different places. I know I actually got my vaccine booked for Sunday, May the 2nd. And I think teachers know. It's been pretty much all over the news. But in case they don't know, let's put that on a billboard and let's get people vaccinated.
I'm good with that one. It's very topical right now. Yeah. So Ronald, IQ or EQ, if you can only pick one, which one do you pick them?
No brainer, EQ. EQ all the way. I think that's something that is so hard to teach, and it's something that I don't even know you could build a course for. Like I try to pull students aside sometimes, and if they do something that is kind of boneheaded, I'm like, guys, all right, I know you're smart, you're getting a 95 in my class, but this and that is not going to fly in the real world. Whether if you're dating someone, whether if you're going for a job interview, whether if you're working in a group project, I think EQ takes you further in life than IQ does for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, I think it is organic moments like that where you can really teach it. Nobody wants the brilliant jerk. Like, I don't care what you're 95 if you don't treat others well on the team, right?
Absolutely.
And then the other one, like, I don't know about a course to teach it, though I do know. Have you heard of the company 21 Toys?
No, I haven't actually. What's that about?
So I've plugged it on here a few times just because I'm such a big fan. They're out of Canada as well. It's just 21toys.com, like 21toys.com. And right now they have two toys in the market. There's the empathy toy and the failure toy. And it was this award-winning industrial designer that essentially has come up with a way when you do kind of group activities, and they have a virtual version of it now, but there's these physical toys where with the empathy toy, both of you are blindfolded, and there's a whole bunch of little pieces. It'll be explained much better on the website than what I'm doing right now. But you have to explain to the other person who's also blindfolded about what this feels like and how it's going in there. And they're supposed to kind of like recreate the shape on their own. And it through the format of the facilitation, it teaches empathy, teaches you to understand what the other person's going through when you can't see them and can't understand it. And then they have another one, the failure toy, which I haven't had the privilege to play around with yet, but I know it's getting a lot of really cool reviews.
I think I might have to buy that toy for Christmas for a lot of my friends this year.
I'm sure it would make a great gift. Yeah. Did you have a favorite class in high school growing up, Ronald?
Yeah, for sure. My favorite class by hands down was high school drama.
Oh, cool.
I took high school drama from grade 10 to 12. And I would say it was definitely one of the most useful classes that I've ever taken. And probably has really actually made me into the teacher that I am today.
That's so cool. I took drama all throughout high school too. And, you don't really reflect on it at the time, but I think so much of just confidence and being able to speak to people and get up and make a fool of yourself, like those opportunities are priceless, because if you don't have a safe space to do that, the chances of you doing that outside of the classroom are going to be a lot more difficult, right?
Yeah, definitely. You got to be, I think it's hard to teach how to be vulnerable to young teenagers. And I think high school drama, regardless of where you take it, definitely brings down your barriers.
What kind of comedy are you doing? Is it like stand-up? Is it improv? Or?
Yeah, I'm actually a stand-up comedian in Toronto. Yeah. Well, I should say was with this because of the pandemic, but I was a stand-up comedian. Hopefully I can be a comedian again once the world goes back to normal. But I was doing it for about 3 years, performing all over Toronto, GTA area. I love just being on stage, writing jokes, and, I think it's important to laugh. And sometimes we take ourselves too seriously, and it's important to kind of live that double life sometimes outside the classroom.
Yep, I agree. And actually, so I've never done stand up, but I took an improv class with Second City in
No
Toronto.
way.
And you know what? 90% of the people in my little cohort were doing it as a professional development activity. It was
Yeah.
recommended from their companies for a lot of the reasons we just talked about, as a way to think on your feet, respond to people, all these kind of core competencies we love talking about. So when things return to whatever sense of normal we're about to move into, highly recommend checking out Ronald's stand-up show and
Yes.
enrolling yourself into an improv class, right?
Absolutely.
Ronald, what's a book that you've read that's had such an impact on your life that maybe you wish you would have read it at a younger age?
There are two books. One book really has nothing to do with school or education at all.
Yeah,
I'm a big comedy nerd, as you just heard. I love Jerry Seinfeld's books. He has he has two books. One was, I think, made in like the 90s or 80s. It's just a book of all of his jokes from the past. And
cool.
he's updated that now recently, called, I think, Is This Anything? And I've been reading that, and I'm a big fan of his, and
Yeah,
that was a great book that I wish he put out earlier. A more, I guess, hands-on book. We were talking about financial literacy earlier. I read this book called Millionaire Teacher. That was handed to me by my business teacher back in the day when I was an adult, though. So for those teachers that might be getting into investing kind of late in the game and want to learn how to build their own personal portfolio, this was a great book to kind of just break it down for teachers of how you can make $1 million just on a teacher salary. So it was awesome.
yeah. Compound interest.
Exactly.
I love Seinfeld. I think I joke sometimes that Seinfeld raised me. And have you heard of Don't Break the Chain?
Don't break the chain.
Yeah, like if you Google it, I don't know if it came from Seinfeld or he's
Yeah.
just the most famous person that kind of talks about it.
Oh, yes.
But he's had this system where no matter what, every day he wrote a joke. Not like he
Yes.
told it, but it was about the habit of writing the joke. Some of them will be good, some will be bad. But if you're writing a joke every day, some of them will be good and makes you think a little bit differently. So
I have heard of that before.
Yeah.
My stand-up teacher at Second City created a show called Don't Break the Chain, and at Comedy Bar downtown Toronto, it would
Yeah.
be just comedians coming up doing jokes that they wrote like yesterday just to see
Yeah.
if it works. And
Yeah.
I never did it, but yeah, you're right. You definitely got to write every single day to be able to build up your massive material.
I'm trying to apply that to a whole bunch of other things like journaling and meditation, to the point where I created a mouse pad on Vistaprint with the slogan "Don't break the chain," so that I see it all day.
Genius.
It's working-ish. So, Ronald, let's finish up. So you have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the education system as we know it today. What would you change?
Oh man, there'd be a lot of things I'd change, but I think the one thing I would love to fix would be grade inflation. I think right now grades are just inflating at this pace that it can't. Your grades can only go up to 100%, right? And right now I feel like every kid is getting like 95, 97, 98, and these university entrance acceptances now are at like, I think they went up 10, 15% since the last time we were in school 10 years ago. So I think something needs to change. I know right now at my school, and I know a lot of schools too, sometimes an 80 is not good enough. 90 is not good enough. A 70 is like a failing grade now for a lot of these students. And it's like, no, like you guys need to remember that 70 is ministry expectation. Like you delivered the work I'm looking for. So students get stressed, parents get stressed. It's a mess out there. And I don't know how to fix it, but I think something worth talking about.
I love it. You brought it up. And if I hadn't already talked about it a bajillion times with some other guests on this podcast, I'd probably go on a bit of a rant. Maybe I still will. There's a book that I've been recommending to a bunch of people called Ungrading. And it's like a collection of 15, I think, or so educators. And they talk about how they've actually done that in their classroom, either going full gradeless or grading less. There's so many issues I have with grades themselves, from the stress and the anxiety piece you just talked about. Yeah. Inflation piece is one of them. But the way I always explain to somebody, at least who's not working in a classroom, is I'll say, like, let's give you an example. You ask your students to do a book report and you give them 5 books to choose from. They're getting graded on this, and grades matter to them because that's how the whole system is set up, and they need that good grade to go to where they want to go, right? Out of the 5 books that you've decided they can pick from, they've already read one of them, right? Which one do you think they're going to pick? The one that they've already read, that they can finish a lot faster and probably do a better job, or one of the other 4 books where they may challenge themselves to learn something new? And we love talking about failure on this podcast, and you learn by failing. They're not going to pick the opportunity to fail. They're going to pick the easy win more often than not, because it's a better mark at the end of the day, right? So it's
100%.
I'm very biased, but I'm very it's really cool to see kind of this movement that's happening where people are grading less, right? So
yeah, I think we could do a whole podcast just on grades, and that would just be opening Pandora's box, I think.
Well, actually, that's a good segue. So how can people learn about Teacher Hotline? Maybe they want to call in with one of the questions about how to go gradeless.
Yeah, so you can go visit me at the Teacher Hotline on Instagram or on Facebook. If you want to reach out personally, you could also reach out to my personal Instagram or Twitter or Facebook handle, which is Ronald Hae, RONALDHAE.
Ronald, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing your story. I'm super excited that you've embedded financial literacy as kind of a core component of your class. And I hope that people listening to this will do the same, however it makes sense in their class. So Ronald, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to talking again.
Thank you so much for having me on, Damien.